Good afternoon, and welcome to the second half of our show here on Unlock the Door Radio. Your host, Michael Cross, and I'd like to spend some time here on a very important topic, I believe, relating to the 2016 presidential elections. First, I just want to say, though, if you want to read up on articles and catch some links to some of the shows that I've done in the past, please check out my website at michaelcross.net. Okay, that's michaelcross.net. Now that I've done the plug, what I would like to do is deal with a question. My daughter and I were talking about this just a few minutes ago, and that is the rise in Donald Trump's popularity. You know, I have a lot of acquaintances, friends, so forth, who are not Americans, okay? They don't live in America. And many of them are like, what's going on in America? You know, because they only hear little bits and pieces about Donald Trump. And so many of them think that Donald Trump is sort of like this crazy individual making crazy statements and has got the Pope mad at him and all kinds of stuff. But just a clarification, the people I know who are promoting Donald Trump tend to be very well educated on politics. They're not so much the people that watch, you know, the nightly news type programs from the corporate media, but many of them tend to be, you know, super informed individuals. And I think that's kind of interesting because on the right, on the political right, you tend to find those kinds of people aiming more towards Donald Trump. On the political left, you find the really informed people that are Democrats or, you know, progressives, whatever you want to call them. The more informed they are, the more they seem to be gravitating to Bernie Sanders. So it's kind of an interesting revolution taking place in the United States where you've got these people that are anti-establishment that are doing very well in the electoral process, in the primaries. Time will tell how well they do in the if they make it to the general election, even if they get their party's nomination. But anyway, I want to deal with what I think is the reason why that Donald Trump is doing better. And one of the reasons I think, obviously, is that he's not an establishment Republican. Okay? Now, let me clarify something here because the Republicans have redefined themselves since the Reagan years. And that's a very important thing to consider. It's kind of like the Republicans have several different branches to them. Okay? The same is true in the Democratic Party. In the Democratic Party, you've got environmentalists, and you've got union workers. Now, they should be kind of like negative to each other. Okay? But they come under the same coalition because they have some agendas that are compatible. Even though some of their other agendas are totally incompatible, they still come under the same roof in the Democratic Party. You've got old style Keynesian economics people that are very much capitalistic, but they believe that the only way that you can keep the economy going is through government intervention in order to smooth out the booms and busts that would naturally occur. And you've got several other constituencies, ethnic constituencies and so forth within the Democratic Party. Well, the Republican Party is made up pretty much the same way. You've got people who are what you would call religious conservatives. You know, their issues of importance are things like prayer in the schools, gay marriage, abortion, those kinds of things that they don't want to see, for instance, gay marriage. You've got economic conservatives. Okay, sometimes these people get called like the Eastern Establishment Republicans. They're not so concerned with social issues, but they're more concerned with low tax rates for business and so forth. I Ironically, now, since Trump tends to be, for not so much immigration, which we'll get to in a moment, this wing tends to be very much pro-immigration. And it has a lot to do with labor supply. If you have a contracting labor supply, such as in the United States today with lower birth rates, then people are going to ask for higher wages. And that's usually seen by businesses as not a good thing. So the more labor supply you have, the more you can keep kind of the wage levels down and therefore increase profits for businesses. Now, the next wing that you might consider is the Neoconservatives. Now, they blend into both parties. They started out kind of Democrat, but because of the many of the people in the 60s who were more, America should just stop being so imperialistic, many of these neoconservatives who do believe in free markets worldwide and that the U.S. should aggressively push the idea of quote-unquote democracy, which of course means, open borders for businesses to invest in countries. That wing, many of them integrated themselves within the Republican Party to a large degree. There were a few in Reagan's administration, but they didn't have all that much power. But after 9/11 in the Bush administration, they got a lot of power. Okay, so you got the neocons. Then you have populist conservatives. Now, they tend to blend in to a large degree with the social conservatives, but the difference there is that they are, they're not as concerned, usually, with stuff like abortion. Gun control is a big issue with them. They don't want any kind of gun control. They disagree with the economic conservatives because they feel, for instance, that there should be controls on immigration and that laws should be passed that favor American production. So factories and stuff should stay within the United States instead of being allowed to outsource and go overseas or to bring workers from overseas to replace American workers in those jobs. And so you've got a tension there. The religious conservatives and the social conservatives tend to get along with each other quite well because they do overlap with each other. The economic conservatives, many people call them country club Republicans, although I will note that there are country club Democrats. I remember when I was at the Democratic convention, I was in San Francisco when the Democrats had their convention back in the 80s. Oh my gosh, I saw so many limousines. I mean, it was like an army. It was like an army of, those ISIS trucks, the big white trucks. Driving that. It's that many limousines I saw down there. So, country club Democrats, country club Republicans. And they actually tend to blend in well with each other better than they do with, for instance, labor Democrats or social issue or populist Republicans. So rich Democrats and rich Republicans, they party together, they golf together, they do all these other things. There's not that much separating them except maybe some differences on economic policy. So this evolution to a new type of Republican really got going under Bush, the first Bush. And it was more of a redefining Republicans sort of away from the social issue guys and away from the populist ones. Many of the populists actually became Republicans during the Reagan administration. They were called the Union, what was it called? The Reagan Democrats, and many of them Union members. And so they became Republican, along with many social issue conservatives, switched from Democrat to Republican during the Reagan years. But when Bush came in, a very pragmatic approach was taken to where, some of these Supreme Court justices that have been appointed by, for instance, George Bush have actually voted more or on some of the big key issues that would be important to the social issue conservatives or the populist conservatives, have voted with the Democrat appointees. So the thing is that when you got George Bush II coming in, he kept this tradition going. In fact, the foreign policy really has not changed that much from Bush to Clinton to Bush and now to Obama. And it has a lot of elements that you could say are interventionist, and they're all obviously what's good for business. What was it? Was it Herbert Hoover that said that? I don't know. It was one of those really obscure Republicans from history. Coolidge, I think, said that what's good for business is good for America. And, of course, they could never imagine how big corporations would get nowadays. The robber barons, so-called robber barons of that era, were nothing compared to the, like, for instance, our media oligopoly today. So anyway, I think what's happening is with Trump jumping in here, you've got a situation where you have Cruz, who's kind of a polite conservative, who's trying to pull in the religious and the populist conservatives, but he's kind of polite about it. And then you got Trump, who basically doesn't seem to care what anyone thinks of him. He just says it. That may explain a lot of his popularity. People really like the fact that he's coming out and he says how he feels. He doesn't pull punches. He's not trying to be polite. He wasn't trained in diplomacy or politics. Okay? He's kind of that, I would say, closest Republican I can think to Trump in recent years is not Ronald Reagan, but more like Teddy Roosevelt. And they do share a lot of similarities in that Trump is not someone who seems to really favor this idea that what's good for business is good for America. He seems to have this idea that what's good for Americans who are in business is good for America. And the distinction I'm making there is this. Many of your large corporations in America have fired and downsized the workers, middle management, sliced it right off, tossed them into the unemployment lines, and they do all their manufacturing in Indonesia or other countries, Vietnam. And this benefits the CEOs because it cuts cost. It benefits the shareholders because more profit you make, the more money you get in dividends and stock value goes up. But it doesn't do much for the local workers. Okay? Traditionally, you could kind of see that there was a symbiotic relationship between management, owners, and workers. Because if the company was doing good, that meant they were able to hire lots of people and give them jobs. And so there was kind of this, okay, well, I may not like the fact that the boss is a multimillionaire, but at least I have food and a nice home, and, you know, I'll send my kids to college and they'll have it better than me. The problem is those jobs have been phased out. The Democrats have done a lot when it comes to environmentalism. We can all, Oregon, spotted owls, okay, Nevada and southern Utah, a lot of coal miners lost their jobs when Clinton changed some of the designations in those areas. And the thing is that I'm trying to think, was it Clinton or Obama? Well, it doesn't matter. But Clinton, of course, signed the trade bills, such as NAFTA, and also the trade bill with China. And look this up on the internet. Factory jobs since 1990. And you'll see the big drop took place during the Clinton years. Okay, after that was signed. So when people are saying, oh, the Republicans are just getting rid of our jobs. Well, actually not entirely. Okay, look that up for yourself. Now, the other thing I would say, though, is that the whole idea that seems to be very good psychologically for Trump is the idea that he speaks a language of people that feel disenfranchised. Republicans have voted Republican for the past 20 years, And they've got people like, they wind up with leaders like Bonnier, and Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, and people like that. And they feel like these kinds of Republicans talk the talk, but they don't do the walk. And so many times they don't want to vote for the Democrats, but the Republicans say, oh no, if you don't vote for the Republican, then you're going to get this happen, and this happen. So they vote for the Republican, and then they get lackluster leadership that makes someone like, Harry Reid look like a charismatic individual or something, and believe me, he's not. But Republicans, I think, have gotten tired. The Republican base, okay, it's not all country club people. Maybe the politicians see it that way because those are the people they rub elbows with. But actually the base is people that work 9-to-5 jobs. Their issues are things like guns. Their issues is like, is the immigration policies of the United States good or not? They see the culture changing at warp speed. And so therefore they start thinking, what's going on here? The Republicans are just, they're not doing anything about this, and everything's just happening. So Trump comes along, starts talking their language, and is getting that kind of support. So I would say that the Republicans' number one objective right now shouldn't be just to jump on Trump, but to try learning from Trump. Because if they don't learn the lesson right now, whether Trump gets a nomination or not, if they don't learn the lesson this election year, I'll predict, and I think I'm pretty safe, the Republicans will never, ever, ever, and you can look at demographics to point this out, they will never inhabit the White House again. And as years go by, they will get less and less and less in the House and the Senate. They will become as the Whigs did back in the 19th century. So I think the Republicans need to actually start examining what's going on and why it's going on. Not, we got to go stop Trump. It doesn't matter how you feel about Trump. You better find out why a Trump phenomena is taking place at this time. Anyway, that's all the time we have now. So thank you for tuning in, and hope you're back next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions.
This is JJ Inc. from Against the Wall, and you're listening to UCY.TV.